to the first task of the speaking section. And well, I, of course, know that many of you were present yesterday when we discussed general aspects of the speaking section. But now we are going to be absolutely concentrated in the speaking task number 1, okay? So please let me share my screen now, even though we are live already. And we're going to be discussing this, okay? Just a second. Okay, very good. Great, so let's start with tonight's class. Very good. Well, so let me share. Here we are. Very good. So look at this. As I told you, the speaking section task number 1 is a very special task in this exam because it's one of the very few spots and places where you are not only allowed to give your opinion, but you're also encouraged to give your opinion and to discuss your own information, data, and knowledge you are aware of about different topics, right? And so please feel free to, in this part of the exam, in this question, mention everything you wanted to say. For example, when we were in the listening section, in the reading section, that I know many of you were wondering if you could use a little bit of your experience and data in order to support the topics they gave you. Now is the time for doing so, okay? Although in the other sections, I always told you, no, please don't do it. Now it's time for doing so, okay? So let us discuss this task that, well, as you can see, belongs to the first type of question that is called independent question, okay? So for those of you who are just joining us, we are discussing the first task of the speaking section. And we are saying that in this part, you are actually allowed and welcome to give your opinion, to give your data, to give your knowledge and information when responding this question, okay? Fantastic, so let's continue. It says, in your first task, this one, you'll be required to say your opinion on a general topic, and you will have to defend and sustain it. This is very important. Look at, for example, the picture that I have here on the left side of my screen. For many of you, this is a very famous and known figure. He's Ben Shapiro, right? Very famous political commentator. And the reason why he's very famous is because he's said to be a very good debater. You know what is a debater, right? A debater is basically somebody who participates in a debate. And well, you know what a debate is, right? It's basically a platform in which two people go and present certain ideas with regard to a topic, and they defend those ideas and positions, right? For example, imagine a debate in which two people go and debate if the war is how is the word, and one person goes and says in that debate, I think the word is plain, right? He's going to give his reasons, he's going to offer some information, some data he has, etc., etc. And then the other person on that debate is going to say, no, I actually believe that the word is round, therefore he's going to offer some reasons for defending that position, some information, some data, etc., and that is the debate, right? Now, whenever you are on this task, dear students, I want you to identify this task with, as I told you, the first task of the speaking section. That is to say that in this particular question, you are going to be debating. I want you to please think that when you are responding this question, you are debating. Because as I say, in a debate, you offer your opinion on a topic, you offer your opinion on a given subject, and you also defend that particular position, subject, with some reasons, illustrations, information, knowledge, data you may have available at that time in order for you, of course, to support your position. And that is exactly what you're going to be doing in this particular question, okay? You're going to be, as I say, requested to offer your opinion about a particular statement. And in that statement, you need to be very, very clear about your position, what your position is, and then to offer some reasons, some justifications, motives, illustrations for supporting your position, saying why you hold that position, okay? Very important. Very good. So always have that on mind. Identify this part with a debate, okay? Now, you will have very little time to finish this task, which breaks down to the following. 15 seconds of preparation and 45 seconds of response, okay? Well, I know that you are going to understand this particular task way better if I show you an illustration, okay? Because remember, illustrations are always helpful for us to explain further all points we're making. So let me please present right now to you 2 different illustrations of this task so that you can understand this particular question way easily. Okay, so please look at my screen right now. Here I have a topic, okay, and these are this is the topic that we are going to be responding right now, because I'm going to offer you an illustration that I recorded myself for our response with regard to this question. We're going to be, as I say, analyzing my response with regard to this question. And look at the question, because this question is very similar to the ones that you are also going to receive on the exam. Let us read it together. It says, some people believe, I'm going to paste it in the chat box just in case you want to read it there instead of on the screen. Look at it. It says, some people believe that raising children is the most beneficial thing a person can do for society. Others are of the opinion that a person's career is their most important task in life. Which opinion do you find more persuasive? Look at it. It's basically a question, right? That is very, well, it's a question, it's a topic that is very general, but it's also very controversial. This is the very classic debate in which people say, right, what is the best thing you can do for humanity? And people say, raising a family, having children, teaching good values, things of that sort. And other people say, no, it's actually your academic skill, your academic career, your profession, what constitutes the greatest contribution you can make to humanity, right? And this is exactly asking you about that question. It's asking you, okay, well, in your opinion, is raising children the greatest contribution somebody can make to society, or it's his career? What is the greatest contribution the person can do for society? Now, as I say, this is asking for your opinion, right? Because it says, which opinion do you find more persuasive? Now, look at the question. This exercise, dear students, the first question of the speaking section, is supposed to be a free question. But if you read it and if you think about it for a while, you're going to discover that this is not totally free. It's not a totally free question. Because although it's asking for your opinion, and that, yeah, that's true, it's asking for you to say what you think on that particular subject or matter, what is happening here, dear students, as well, is that if you realize, this is giving you two different options for you to choose from in order to respond this question. It's not giving you the option to invent the response. It's giving you two options that you have to choose from and respond about. For example, here it gives you first option, saying that children or raising children is the greatest contribution you can make to society, or the second option, that is your career, the most important thing you can do for society. So it gives you two different options, right? And they're asking you to choose from one of these options and to offer a response giving your opinion with regard to this topic, but taking one of those positions. You have to go in your response and say, if you believe that raising children is the most significant contribution you can make, or your career. But in your response to your students, you are not allowed to, for example, invent a third answer or a third option, because I have seen that is a very common mistake of some of my students, that they see, for example, this question and they say, okay, I don't like any of these possibilities. What I'm going to do is I'm going to incorporate a third answer. That is certainly not advantageous. It's not something correct, okay? Because as I say, think about this question. Why do you think that ETS is giving you the chance to choose from a very limited range of options? That is to say, a binary combination, because you have two different possibilities here, right? Binary. The reason is because, dear students, you have told me in the introductory class we had some time ago, that many of you were looking for having this exam as a means for being accepted into American and European universities, right? And think about it. Why do you think that universities love this exam as a demonstration of your English proficiency? It's because it gives you this type of questions. When universities are looking for students, they are looking for people who are able to defend positions, who are able to enrich the campus or the university campus with very fruitful conversations. So you need to be able to defend a particular position. And they are giving you here these two positions in order to make sure how good you are at defending these ones, okay? So as I say, don't invent a third option here. And also, don't take the approach when responding to the question and giving your opinion of giving a middle ground response. What many people do, and it's also incorrect, is that instead of responding to the question and saying, okay, I believe that raising children is the most important thing you can do for society, and they defend that, instead of doing that response, what they do is, okay, they say, well, I'm not convinced by any of these possibilities, so I'm going to offer a review of both of them stating its disadvantages and advantages. And that is also incorrect, dear students, because middle ground in this case is not appreciated. You are, as I say, being requested to defend a position. They want to see how good you are at defending and fighting for things you are passionate about. Okay, so as I say, you have to, in this case, dear students, choose one of the options they give you and respond and give your opinion, taking that position. Of course, not both of them, just one position. You have to defend one of these positions. Okay, so listen to my response that I have recorded and prepared for you. And you're going to listen how I responded to this question that we have just read, okay? And you're going to notice that in my response here, students, the only thing I do is I state my opinion, which of these options I find to be more correct, if raising a family or your career is the greatest contribution to society. And you're going to notice that after I state my opinion, I start to defend it. I'm going to offer some arguments, some reasons, and some illustrations for, as I mentioned, defending and supporting my position, okay? So please have that in mind and let us listen to my response, trying to catch the phrases I use, try to understand the structure, because later I'm going to be sharing this structure with you so that you can also apply it in your exam, okay? So please let us listen to my response.
Okay, with regard to the topic, I believe that a person's career is the most important task in life. I believe this way because of the following reasons. First of all, children are not necessarily a positive addition to the world. Maybe they turn out to be criminals. For example, I had an uncle who had a child that got into drugs and began stealing things. Secondly, if you're really good at your profession, you can come off with a revolutionary idea to positively affect people's life. As I want, for example, to be able to enact a law to allow people to create enterprises with very low taxes to improve their quality of life.
Very good. There you are. So, dear students, as you can see, this is a very, very easy response, right? Because the only thing I'm doing in this case is, as I told you, I'm stating my opinion to begin with, and then I offer a defense of that particular illustration, or excuse me, position in this case, right? And how do I defend my position? How do I support my particular perspective on this subject or on this issue? Well, I offer two arguments and two illustrations, right? But don't worry, I'm going to explain that further. But before I do that, let me show you one more illustration in order for you to have it more clear, okay? So here I have a second question. As you can see, it's a very similar topic in the sense that it's also a general topic, and it's also very, very, very much, well, controversial because it divides people. And that is the idea. You're going to notice when we practice that many of you are going to disagree. And that's the point, because we want to see how much convincing responses you are able to draw for your particular case. All right. So please, let us read this together. It says, the second question says the following. Some people think that the criminal justice system should exist to punish wrongdoing, whereas others believe it should be used to prevent people from reoffending after their sentence is over. Which opinion do you find more persuasive? That's the question now, okay? So as you can see, it's about the criminal justice system. All right, so I'm going to let you listen to my response for this question, and you're going to notice that I am actually following the same structure. My response is very similar. The only thing that changes, of course, is the topic and my arguments and illustrations, but how I respond, my organization, my template is very similar, okay? So please pay attention to my phrases, pay attention to how I organize my response, and then we are going to be analyzing the responses way deeper through the template that I'm going to be sharing with you, okay? So let us listen to my second response for this question about criminal justice systems, and let's go.
Okay, with regard to the topic, I believe that justice systems should exist to punish wrongdoings. I believe this way because of the following reasons. First of all, because it is fairer to punish people with retributive justice, that is, to punish what they have done. For example, I saw yesterday a man who had raped a poor girl. He must be punished because he committed such atrocity and not otherwise. Secondly, because if you punish people very severely for what they did, you disencourage them to do it again. For example, I know of a politician that did not embezzle again of his authority after he got in jail.
There you are. Fantastic. So if you noticed, my approach was exactly the same. I stated my opinion and then I offered two arguments and two illustrations in order to support my position. In this case, I went for the one that said justice systems should be used in order for people being punished and, of course, chastised because of wrongdoings they have done. Now, let me please show you the following. The reason why I was using this particular structure, dear students, was because here I have it. This is the template that you should actually follow in your responses. And if you noticed, the one that I was also using in both of my responses, okay? So let us analyze it together. It contains 4 different steps that are very simple. And then, of course, let us comment on both of my responses. For example, the first step is basically the introduction to the responses, you can see. And it consists, first of all, of an introductory phrase. As you can see, it says, with regard to the topic, right? And if you listened very carefully to my responses, I always started my responses by saying this phrase, with regard to the topic, and then I offered my opinion, right? With regard to the topic, for example, with regard to the topic, I believe that a person's career is the most important contribution to life or society, right? That was my first response to the first question. I said, with regard to the topic, I believe that a person's career is the greatest contribution he can make to society. As you can notice, dear students, this is the introduction. You always say this phrase with regard to the topic, and then you state your opinion. With regard to the topic, I believe that, for example, the second illustration, with regard to the topic, I believe that justice systems should be used in order to punish wrongdoings, right? That was my second response. And as you notice, I was using the same template, the same step with regard to the topic, and then comes the opinion. And please have in mind that my opinion is always very short. I never spend a long time in this part of the response because obviously it's just the introduction. And your opinion, dear students, is going to be clarified very much through the arguments and illustrations you give later on. Nonetheless, always try to be very clear and concise, as I say, opinions or positions, and not, as I mentioned, expending very long time in offering your opinion or your perspective on this issue, because that perspective is going to be way clarified and developed through the rest of the response, okay? So as I said, conform yourself with a very clear and concise, very concise opinion on the subject at this part of the response, okay? So with regard to the topic, and then comes the particular opinion on the subject you have received, okay? Then, when you finalize this step, the introduction, you go to the second. It says, because of the following reasons. This is, by the way, dear students, a transition phrase. Is a sentence that is allowing us to make or is allowing us to transition it from the first part of the response, that is the introduction, to the body of the response, that is the third and the fourth step. Now, as you can see, it's a sentence that I always used in my responses as well. I always said, for example, something like, well, I believe this way because of the following reasons, right? For example, with regard to the topic, I believe that a person's career is the most important contribution you can make to society. I believe this way because of the following reasons. Or in the second response I offered, with regard to the topic, I believe that justice systems should be helping us to punish wrongdoings. I believe this way because of the following reasons, right? Something like that. That is how you have to use these steps. Because as I mentioned, this sentence is helping us to transition it from the first part of the response to the last part of the response. And this helps to organizations. And of course, this helps to make your response way clearer so that the reviewer, the person who is going to listen to you, manages to understand your arguments and your response very easily, right? And you want to, of course, facilitate his task so that he can give you a very good score, right? And something that I was forgetting to mention here is that, dear students, remember that in a debate, going back to the topic of debates, in a debate, your objective, dear students, is convincing, right? Convincing your audience that your position is right. As I told you, if you are defending that the word is plain, then you're going to try to convince your audience, the people who listen to you, that the word is indeed plain. But if you're defending that the word is round, you are defending that, well, it's actually the other way around, right? That is to say, well, you're trying to convince people that the word is a sphere, basically. Now, in this case, your students, is not the exception. You do have an audience in your debate. In this case, of course, is the reviewer. The person who listens to your answer is your audience. And you have to try to convince him that your that your response, that your position, it's right. That is to say, remember, other people, other test takers are going to defend other positions. So if you manage to defend yours so that the reviewer gets convinced that your response is actually true and it applies to your life, then you're going to receive a high score. Because as I say, the thing here is trying to convince the reviewer that your position is actually right, and any other people who have chosen a wrong position or a contrary position to yours are wrong, but you are right. Okay, that's the idea. So as I mentioned, in your response, always have in mind you have to concentrate on your topic and giving good arguments and illustrations so that you convince your reviewer that your position, the one that you have chosen, it's right. Okay, that's the idea. Fantastic. Let me continue. So after you go with the transition phrase, you come to the body of the response, the most important part. And what is the body of the response? Well, the third step basically consists of the first argument and illustration. As you can see here, and well, after I always say, right, because of the following reasons, I always say first, and I offer my argument. For example, in the first response that I did, right, with regard to this contributions to society, I said, right, with regard to the topic, I believe that raising children, that a person's career is the most important contribution to life. I believe this way because of the following reasons. First, because children are not necessarily a positive addition to the world. That was my first argument, right? Children are not necessarily a positive addition to the world. Now, if you notice, dear students, what I'm doing here is that in my arguments, I'm not being very much extensive, right? I'm not being extensive. I'm not extending my argument. I'm not making it very long. My argument is actually one sentence. Children are not necessarily a positive addition to the world. That's it. That's my argument. Okay? And that's what I want you to imitate. Please, when you are responding, when you are giving your responses, because we're going to practice, please have in mind that you need to have very short arguments, short sentences, okay? And not the other way around. Because if you present very large arguments and explain and re-explaining again and once again, what is going to happen is that you're not going to have time to include the illustrations. And I tell you, the illustrations are way more important than arguments. Because, by the way, dear students, having super clever arguments is not actually necessary. Don't always expect to come up with a super fantastic argument. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to think about arguments. We struggle with that. But that doesn't mean, dear students, that it doesn't help you. If your argument is in favor of your position, serves the purpose of arguing, of course, and demonstrating that your position, it's right, applies to your life, it's good. It's a good argument, okay? So don't always expect coming with fantastic arguments. Any argument, it's fine as far as it supports your case, okay? Now, the first argument, as I say, and the second argument as well, both of them must be very short, very concise. As I say, one sentence or two as a maximum. In this case, for example, in the second response, my first argument was, with regard to the topic, I believe that justice systems should be used to punish wrongdoings because of the following reasons. First, because retributive justice is better than any other, right? That was my first argument. And if you notice, again, it's a very short and concise argument. I'm not saying retributive justice is the better, and it also has these conditions, and the conditions are like this, and then, I mean, I'm not spending a long time on the argument. Right after I mention my very short argument, what I do is to move on immediately to the illustration. For example, firstly, children are not necessarily a good addition to the world. That is what I said in the first response, right? That was my first argument. When I did my first argument, very short, as you notice, I move on to the illustration. What did I say? For example, I have an uncle who had a child who got into drugs and began stealing things. As you can notice, I am spending more time on my illustration because I'm talking about, well, I have an uncle who had a child who got into drugs and began stealing things as a criminal. That is my illustration. So why do you think that I'm using this illustration? I'm using this illustration because it exemplifies my points. It demonstrates that my point applies to the real world. And I'm making it very personal and very specific because I'm talking about my own family, my uncle, my cousin who had these problems with drugs, etc., etc. And I'm being very specific because I'm mentioning, well, my uncle had this son who got into drugs, began stealing things, etc., etc. As specific, and as much specific and as much personal you do your responses, the better, dear students, okay? So please do them as personal and as specific as you can, because that is the formula for having very solid and convincing arguments. Remember that you're trying to come up with arguments and illustrations that convince your reviewer that your position is actually true and people who have chosen the contrary position are wrong. So how can you convince your reviewer? By offering, as I say, very personal and specific illustrations, okay? So, and by the way, for example, this illustration that I'm talking about right now, that I have an uncle who had a child, etc., is not true. I don't have an uncle who had a child who had drugs problems. Very good, thank God. I wouldn't like to have such a problem or such an issue in my family. Now, the thing is that, as you can see, I made this illustration up. I made it up. I invented it, right? And maybe you're wondering, is this legal? Yeah, totally. It's totally legal. Why? Because, dear students, this is not an exam about honesty, okay? You are not being evaluated with regard to how honest you are exemplifying or using examples of real life to exemplify topics. This is this is an exam about English. Therefore, when you are, in this case, dear students, having an exam about English, you have to use any means possible in order for you to demonstrate how good you are at speaking English. And of course, that implies using figurative language. In this case, talking about things that, although are not totally true, nevertheless, they exemplify and will serve as a mechanism for you to demonstrate how good you are speaking this language, okay? So please, as I say, have this on mind, all right? You can make up your illustrations. As far as I say, they are very specific and very, very much personal. If they have that formula, if they meet that particular characteristic, fantastic. Those are going to be great illustrations, trust me, okay? So when I present my very short and concise argument, right? And I have moved to my illustration and I finalize my illustration, what comes next? Second argument and second illustration, right? A second argument, for example, could have been in my first response, I said, right? Secondly, if you are very good at your profession, you can come up with a revolutionary idea to help people's life. Very short, very concise, very clear, right? I'm not expanding too much. Why? Because I finalize with that argument and I move on rapidly to the illustration, right? I said, as a law student, I want to be able in the future to enact a law in order to help people create businesses and enterprises without paying taxes. And this is true actually, right? Because as I told you, I'm about to graduate from laws. And that means that, of course, I'm going to have the opportunity to have participation in this law creation processes. So as I say, I'm saying what I want to do and demonstrate that, yes, if you are good at your profession, you can help people to improve their quality of life. Why? Because certainly if you create a law that helps people create enterprises, startups, businesses without paying taxes or very low taxes, you are helping people, right? Because you are helping them to save their gainings and earnings, and of course, making a better place for their family's development. So as you can see, in this case, I am using indeed an experience from my own life in order to demonstrate that this is actually true. And you can do it whenever you have something handy that comes from your own experience, comes from your own work, that is actually true, and you can use to exemplify your argument, to develop it further. Use it, why not? But whenever you don't find that, or you find easier to come up with a made-up example, an invented illustration, do it as well. It's totally fine. It's not illegal, okay? But as I say, if your arguments are personal and specific, that is the formula. Your arguments and illustrations are going to be very powerful, and you are going to receive a high score because that's how you get your high scores, okay? That's what people who have high scores do. They receive the question and they propose arguments that are short and very personal and specific illustrations, okay? That's what you have to do. Fantastic. And when you finalize this, you are done with the response. There is nothing else to add. And by the way, here, I want to make emphasis here on the order of the arguments and illustrations, always. First argument and the illustration for the first argument. Then second argument and the illustration for the second argument. That is the order, okay? It's not illustration and then the argument. No, it's argument and the illustration for the argument and so forth and so on. All right, so I want to leave here some space for you to make questions. Dear students, anything I could clarify with regard to the first task or with regard to the template and structure we are discussing right now, please tell me. I'm going to be happy to help you. Angel, Lucia, Juan, Diana, Paula, Crisbel, any question with regard to this topic? Yeah, Crisbel, please tell me.
Hi, teacher. About the arguments. When you, I heard that you said firstly, yes.
Yes. Yes.
Secondly,
Yes?
And it doesn't matter if I say first, second, third,
Mhm.
or
No.
it's more formal to say secondly.
Okay, well, very good question. Thank you very much, dear Criswell. Yeah, I mean, it could be considered more formal when you say, yeah, secondly, firstly, but it is not, let's say, a very much relevant factor. If it comes to you more naturally to say first or second, it's totally fine. You can use it. Now, of course, what determines if you get a high score in vocabulary is whenever you introduce in your response advanced words. For example, at some point in your response, instead of saying that something is great, you can say, for example, oh, that is illustrious, right? Because that is another word that is advanced for saying something it's great, but with a more professional and scholar word, right? That is illustrious, for example. So as I say, the vocabulary is evaluated in things of that sort, like what type of words you include in your response, not too much in the connectors. You can actually, instead of saying first or second, you can say, for example, moreover, furthermore, to begin with, right? You can interchange that. That is totally fine, but it doesn't affect, let's say, the vocabulary part of the response. Yeah, is that fine?
Yes, teacher. And what can we do if we don't know if we don't know some arguments in order to answer some questions that could
Mhm.
be too difficult for
Okay.
us?
Okay, well, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, well, in that case, for example, what you can do is if you manage to come out, to come up with one particular argument for the response and you're not able to come up with two, okay, what you can do is, as I say, in that case, you can maybe spend a little bit more of time on the first argument and to offer a larger illustration as well. But that is the worst case scenario, right? We're going to try to practice so you can always come up with two arguments because the idea is that we're trying to get high scores, right? And when people receive high scores, there is always a pattern there. And it's that people who receive high scores in this section always get two arguments for their responses. And that's because, of course, when you present two arguments, that represents that you're making a very strong case for your position. But when you present merely one argument, that means that you are not very much, let's say, capable of defending positions, or your position is actually, in this case, weak, right? But what we're going to try to practice is to always come up with two. Now, if, as I say, in the worst case scenario in which you're not able to come up with two arguments, it's fine. You can mention one. As I say, it's not like the capital sin, but we're going to always try to aim at getting two different arguments, okay? But we're going to share some other techniques later as well with regard to how can you use one argument, but let us always try to get two, okay? Because that will be, as I say, the adequate and the most convenient manner to respond. Okay, is that fine, dear Criswell?
Yes, teacher. Thank you.
Okay, my pleasure. Any other question, dear students? Angel, Lucia, Juan, Leana, Paula, questions? We're fine here. Okay, so it's time for us to practice because I know that all of you want to practice for this, and let's do it. Now, before we do it, just two simple recommendations, okay? Very short, very short, trust me. Now, I want to specify this. There is no right or wrong position to choose, dear students, when you are planning your response, okay? If you want to go, let's say, for a position that you consider to be easily defendable, go for that one. For example, it has happened to many of my students that they told me, okay, when I took my exam, the question was about a topic that I knew about, but my position on the actual world in the real life was very difficult to defend for me, because it happens sometimes, right? That what we believe is very difficult to defend or to explain to other people. So it happens very commonly. So what can we do in order to, of course, anyways, receive a good qualification in the exam? What I always recommend you to do is go for the position that you consider to be more easily defendable. Go for the position, go for the answer, go for the opinion in this case, that you say, okay, if I go for this one, it's going to be super easy to come up with arguments. Go for that one. As I say, don't limit yourself to always represent the reality just as it is. In this case, you can very confidently go for the positions that are not, in this case, your actual position in the real life, but nonetheless represent very easy responses, very easy illustrations that you can come up more rapidly. So as I said, there is no wrong or right response to choose. You can choose any of them, and if you present good arguments and good illustrations, trust me, you're going to receive a high score. Now, second recommendation. Once you have chosen your position, dear students, never please, and this is serious, like never in your response, talk about positive things with regard to the contrary position. For example, imagine that you, just as I did, in the first question we saw as an illustration, went for the option that it is your career that represents the greatest contribution you can make to society. Okay, imagine that you go for that option as well. So when you are responding, you should never say any positive thing with regard to the contrary position that raising a family is the greatest contribution you can make to society. So for example, in your response, you should avoid saying something like, but well, I mean, my father decided to create a family instead of concentrating his work, and that was good. He raised me. I mean, if you start to comment positive things with regard to the contrary position you have not decided to defend, what's going to happen? That your response is going to become ambiguous. It's going to turn out ambiguous at the end. And you don't want ambiguity in your particular response, dear students. You want to offer a response that is very clear, that defends a particular position, and that's it. So as I say, if you're going to mention at some point the contrary position that you have decided not to defend, talk about negative aspects of that position. Of course, you are going to try to basically demonstrate that they are wrong, but not that you are confused or you are insecure about your position. No, please avoid ambiguity. And as I say, preferable not to mention, never mention the other position. Concentrate on your position. Talk about why it's your position correct. And if you are going to mention the other position at some point, do it in order to question them, to make objections about the other position, not to comment positive or good things about the other position, because in that case, your response is going to become very ambiguous. As I say, nobody's going to be sure what position you are defending at the end. So as I say, avoid doing that. And last thing, in your responses to your students, always avoid speaking with subjunctive mood. That is to say, avoid expressions like maybe, or I guess, or probably, perhaps, right? Expressions like those are very much unconfident. They are demonstrating lack of confidence in your arguments, lack of confidence in your illustrations. And you are, of course, avoiding by any matters and by any means to demonstrate that you are, as I say, unconfident about your responses, because you want to convince the reviewer that your position is right. But if you constantly say things that somehow suggest you are insecure and unconfident of your response, how on earth you're going to convince the reviewer, right, that your position is true? You have to be, as I say, always speaking with affirmatives, like this is my response because of this, and this information leads us to this and this and that, but never saying probably or likely or I guess. I mean, those are expressions that do not convey, as I say, confidence. And in this case, you want to, make the impression that you are very confident and very much solid with your response, with your arguments, and with your illustration, okay? So please have that in mind. It's very important. Fantastic. So having recommended those things, let us practice, okay? So please, all of you, grab a piece of paper, grab a pencil, because we are going to be, of course, responding. And why do I ask you to take a pencil and stuff like that? Well, because of a very simple reason. You know that we have already learned how to take notes, etc. And in this case, taking notes is also important, right? Because, well, you have your paper, right? You have your pencil. So what you do, the first thing you do is you take that, right? And on your blank sheet of paper, you have to write down the structure we have shared. That is this one, right? With regard to the topic, because of the following reasons, etc. So as I say, look at this picture. Here is a blank sheet of paper, right? And in this case, this is the structure for the second task. Okay, we have not discussed that part yet, but nonetheless, it's just an illustration. Okay, as I say, look at my screen. I have a blank sheet of paper, and here I have, of course, as I mentioned, here I have some letters written on. What is that? Is the structure for the question. In this case, the structure that we have shared today, this one. So the first thing you do on your paper is to write down the structure you're going to follow. And you have to write it down, as you can see here, leaving some blank spaces between each point. Why? Because, for example, you write, right, on your blank sheet of paper, you write, with regard to the topic, 2 points, and you leave a blank space. And then you continue below. because of the following reasons. 2 points, you continue below, you leave on a space, right? You say, well, firstly, comma, leave on a space. Secondly, comma. Why? Because when you receive your topic, when you receive the question you have to respond, the only thing you're going to do is to fill, rellenar, those blank spaces with the information you have received, right? Because in this case, if the question is about, again, just assistance, and you're going to say, okay, to begin with, excuse me, with regard to the topic, justice assistance should be used, right? And because of the following reasons. Firstly, because justice systems are retributive. Secondly, because justice should only punish people, right? So as I said, leave this blank space for you, and you're going to fill within these blank spaces all the information you need in order to complete your exercises, okay? So fantastic. Please try to follow that particular exercise as well. It's very important. There we are. Okay, so we're going to practice now. So please look at my screen. And here I have the first question for you, dear students. I'm going to paste it to the chat box as well if you want to read it there. And this is, by the way, how the section looks like. I am right now on my simulator. And on one side of your screen, you always have the instructions for the question that you don't have to read, of course, because you already know what to do. And on the other side, you have the question. So in this case, let's see what is the topic they have given us. It says, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Why or why not? Use details and examples to support your answer. And it says, listening to music while studying is a bad idea because it makes the time spent less effective. You have 15 seconds, as I told you, to prepare your response and 45 seconds in order to speak. Okay? So please, now all of you are going to have 15 seconds to prepare your response, and then one by one, you're going to turn on your microphone. I'm going to be naming each of you, and you're going to be responding in 45 seconds, okay? And at the end, I'm going to offer you some feedback to each of you with regard to your responses, okay? Fantastic. So please, all of you dear students, take your piece of paper, write your structure, and please start thinking about your arguments and your illustrations and prepare your response now. All right, great. And as you notice here, dear students, this is a chronometer that has this green bar, right? So when it begins to get empty, then you know that your time is, of course, being consumed. And when it's totally empty, your time is over, okay? So, well, I'm going to be choosing some of you randomly so you can respond to the question, as I say, one by one. Okay, so please, dear Angel, could you delight us with your response to start this round of responses? Very good. So please, dear Angel, start responding to this question now.
With regard to the topic of music while you are studying, I am disagree with this statement because it demonstrates is you are more concentrated while you are listening music. As for example, while I was writing my thesis in my degree, I improved my productivity in exponential while when I decide to listen music. My second argument for my opinion is in my work, my mates use earphone all the time, and they say they are more concentrated while they are doing the activity, and that's the reason why I defend that position.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear Angel. Very good, very, very good. Okay, there you are. So let's continue with, who's going to continue? Please, dear Lucia, could you delight us with your response, please, as Angel did? Please have your microphone ready and start responding to the question now.
Okay. I disagree with the statement because I think because for two reasons. First, I think that music can. I'm not a teacher. I can't.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Let us start again.
Okay.
So please start responding now.
Okay. With regard to the topic, I disagree with the statement because of the following reasons. First, I think that music can be a. I know, teacher. I can't.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Other person.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's okay. I'm gonna come back to you then at the end. Okay. Thank you. Don't worry, Lucia. It happens. Okay, let's go with Chris Bell. Dear Chris Bell, could you delight us, please, with your response? Okay, so
okay.
okay, very good. So please start responding to the question now.
With regard to the topic, listening to the music while studying is a bad idea because it makes the time spent less effective. It's right for me because of the following reasons. Firstly, argument and illustration. I believe that most of the people who works and do everything in order um, to do their activities waste their time. So, as an example, I know a friend that didn't do more homework and he couldn't finish all their things in a day.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Chris Bell. Very good. All right, let's go with Juan Pablo. Please, dear Juan, delight us with your response. Turn on your microphone. And please start delivering your response for this question now.
I am agree about listening music, but maybe we can spend the time. It's because we can concentrate sometimes. So when personally I do this activity with music, I can't concentrate very well. So I try to stop the music and try again, and I do better. But I can't be um, a frequency person, so constantly person. So I try to do this every day.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, dear Juan. Fantastic. There you are. Very good. Okay, so let's continue with our dear Diana. Please, dear Diana, we're going to be the following. Please start responding to the question now.
Teacher, one moment, please.
Oh yeah, of course. Why not? Don't worry.
Please.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Don't worry. So let's go with Paula then first, and then with Diana. Please, dear Paula, delight us with your response. And you can start responding this question now.
With regard to the topic, I believe that listening to music while studying is a bad idea. I believe this way because of the following reasons. First of all, you can concentrate effectively and you miss some details. To illustrate this, when I do some homework while listening to music, I usually miss some important numbers and dates. Secondly, sometimes while listening to music, you sing and waste time instead of concentrating and doing your work or studying. Exemplifying, I have lost several minutes while getting into the song.
Okay. Very good. Very, very good. Thank you very much, dear Paula. Fantastic. There you are. Okay, so let's come back then to our Lucia. Please, Lucia, could you now start with your response? I think that we can come back to you. All right. So please start responding to the question now.
I disagree with the statement because first, I think that music can help you to concentrate more in your studies. When I was in the university, I always studied with music and my notes increased. And secondly, some studies demonstrate that study with music is more effective, but it depends on what type of music you heard to study. For instance, they say that hear classical music is the best way to study better.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Fantastic, Lucia. Very, very good. Okay. There you are. And let us finalize with Diana, please, dear Diana, delight us with your response. Start responding to the question now.
In my opinion, music makes you concentrate more and to study for two reasons. The first, because if you play kid relaxing music, it makes your brain better receive the information of what you are studying. And second reason, because it is a more effective method and to be able to take an exam in the best way.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Diana. Fantastic. There you are. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, guys. Well, there you are. Well, we can start now with the feedback to all of you. Okay. So let's start with Angel. So Angel, for example, talked about, well, in this case, he was disagreeing with this because he thinks, in this case, that listening to music while studying is a good idea. And he thinks so because this allows him to be more concentrated. Fantastic. A very good argument. And, well, you, of course, express it very, very shortly. It was fantastic. And you give up, well, in this case, you gave a very good illustration. That was that when you were doing your thesis, you were able to perform better on it and to investigate more efficiently by listening to music at the same time. Fantastic. That is what I mean when I say a personal and a specific illustration. Okay. Maybe if you mention what was your thesis about, it could have been even better, right? But as I say, as specific as you can make it, the better. Okay. Now, the second argument, you said that when you are studying in group or when you're working in group with your friends, music also helps, right? And in that case, I guess that the time was not sufficient for you to include illustration, but the argument was very much promising. So I would encourage you to, we're going to continue to practice so that you can include the second illustration as well. But it was a fantastic response, dear Angel. Very good. Okay, very, very good. Okay, let's continue with Lucia. So for example, Lucia in this case talked about how, well, when she was listening to music, she also got more concentrated and, well, the percentage of notes she wrote, or she wrote in this case, increased. Fantastic. She talked about as well, and that is what I mean when I say specific illustration, right? Talking about herself in the university, what happens that her notes increased. She was able to write down more information. Very good. And then she offered a very interesting thing. She offered, well, data from on the study she was aware of that said that classical music is actually something that, well, intervenes in your learning and apprehension process and makes it more effective and, of course, efficient. Very good. By the way, you can always do that, okay? Dear students, you can mention if you are aware of some scientific or scientific information or data that you can include in your response, you can always do it, okay? It's totally welcomed, as Lucia did in this case, and it was fantastic. The only thing here would be this fantastic information you gave, try to make it more affirmative, like, secondly, listening to classical music makes you a genius, something like that. And you say, right? For example, my cousin who has listened to Beethoven since he was, I don't know, 10 years old, now has an IQ of 110, right? Something like that. By making this affirmative data very much personal and specific, you make it more powerful as it is right now. Okay, but very good, dear Lucia. Very, very good. Okay, Chris Bell. For example, Chris Bell in this case said that, yeah, she gave two arguments in this case as well. She talked about, well, how music as well deconcentrates, of course, etc. And well, fantastic. It was a very good response as well. Here, my recommendation would be, you know, Chris Bell, when you are in your introduction, when you are in the first part of the response, you don't have to read the entire passage. For example, this, like, it is not necessary to read the entire idea. You can merely say, for example, well, with regards to the topic, I believe that music is or studying or listening to music while studying is a good idea. And that's it. Or I believe that music with a study are a great combination. You can actually change here the wording if you don't like this one, and you can reduce the wording so that your introduction is shorter. As I said, you don't have to read the entire statement, but you can reduce it. You can read just one part of it, something like, with regard to the topic, I believe that listening to music while studying is a great idea. Or you can say, study and music are fantastic, something like that. could help you to reduce your time in the introduction. And as I say, it gives you more time for the important moments of the response. But very good as well. And fantastic illustrations. You talked about as well the concentration, and you offered the illustrations, right? So as I say, let us continue. Very good. Let's go with Juan Pablo. Juan Pablo as well here talked about that music in his case was something very inconsistent, because sometimes it allowed him to concentrate better, and sometimes to as well miss a little bit of the sense of the work he was doing. Well, in this case, it's fine, dear Juan. I know what the point you were trying to make. Like, it depends on the context, right? That's what you were trying to say. But I would recommend you trying to avoid like making statements that maybe for some people are not going to be that clear. I mean, I understood your point that you said, well, music, yes, certainly. At some points, it's fine. At some points, in my personal experience, it concentrates me, but sometimes it's fine as well. So as I say, better if you always go with a very, very determined and very, very rigid position, like, well, music, it's totally fine for me, or it's totally bad for me. In your case, you have said, well, for me, it concentrates me, and that's it. And you offer, right, some reasons why it concentrates you, because as some of your students and your classmates said, you concentrate on the lyrics of the song instead of the homework or something like that. Could have been fantastic, okay? But as I say, it's a very good response, but just in order to prevent a possible objection of the reviewer who's going to listen to you, let us try to make your responses a little bit more specific and rich, as I say, like going for one of them more precisely, okay? But very good as well. And Diana, for example, talked about relaxing music as well, helping her in order to have a better concentration and performance. Fantastic. Here, the only thing I liked to me was the illustration. If you said, for example, something like, when I do my homework and I listen to music by the Beatles, for example, that allows me to concentrate because of their very relaxing and calming music, right? Something like that could have been fantastic, because you will be being a little bit more specific and mentioning an illustration that is personal, right? So very good, dear Diana as well. And finally, here we have Paula as well, that said, for example, that when she is doing homework, music concentrates her because she misses, right, some important points on her homework, and also she starts to sing the songs instead of paying attention to the work. That is fantastic. That is a very good illustration. And maybe if you mentioned what type of music you were listening when that happened to you, something like, I was listening to a song by Malcolm Jackson, and I started to sing Thriller instead of paying attention to my homework, could have been even better, right? Because as I say, if you make it very specific, it always turns better. But fantastic, dear Paul. It was a very good response and very good argument as well. So great, there you are. As you can see, those are the feedbacks for you. And well, I think that, well, my first impression, very good, very much impressed of your performances. You demonstrated a fantastic level. And well, tomorrow, please don't miss tomorrow's class, because we are just going to practice more practices like this one, a lot of them, in a lot of feedback as well. And before you go, I have a gift for all of you. I was working on this afternoon. It's, well, it's a speaking section practice for you. Of course, it's not homework or something. It's just material for you to practice that I was, well, as I say, I was looking for, and it's free resources for you to practice in your free time for the speaking section. Okay, so please have that in mind. I am going to be sending another material in tonight's down or tomorrow morning as a maximum. Okay, but thank you very much for paying attention, and please let me take your assistance before you go. Okay. All right, let's go. And please as well help me with the traditional poll we always fill. Dear students, you know that you help me a lot. Okay, by filling that poll. And also, please, if you have any question, any commentary, please feel free to express it. Let's see. All right. So let's go with, is here present Jasmine Azucena? All right. What about Reyes Andre? Okay. Fantastic. Let me continue. Thank you for your responses, dear students. Could you help me please with one more poll? You know that today it's Wednesday, and I have to fill 2 polls because the company requires me to do so. So please, sorry for bothering you. Help me with that one as well. Okay. As I said, it's the company. Okay. So let us continue. Paula Andrea.
Present.
Thank you very much, Paula. What about Andrea Mercedes? Alexander David? Intriago Ángel?
Present.
Thank you very much, Angel. What about Antesana Mateo? Antesana Sergio? Sara Neda? Y Kevin Alcides, all right? And finally, we have Duran Diana.
Present, teacher.
Thank you very much, dear Diana. What about Lucia Adriasola?
Present.
Thank you very much, dear Lucia. What about Crisbel Tania?
Present, teacher.
Thank you very much, Crisbel. And finally, we have Juan Pablo Duran.
Present, teacher.
Thank you very much, Juan. There you are. Fantastic. Well, fantastic. Thank you very much for your presence. See you tomorrow, dear students, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you, teacher. Bye, teacher.
Thank you,
very
teacher.
much.